your commitment to thinking about the future of Leonardo, and your willingness to use the ideas and engage with the ideas of this wider community and, in fact, the people in your group. I just want to say a little bit about that. But effectively, what I want you to do through the second part of the workshop is to cut things up, move them around, argue about them, come to some beautiful fusion or alchemical solution. And at the end of the day, we'll have a manifesto or 7 or 8, and then we'll read them out, film them, and this will be the material that inspires, challenges, and provokes the board tomorrow. Back to the slide. You've got a second chance to see them there, so you really should be able to answer everything later. Just a couple of reflections from me, really brief, just on yesterday. So I think Roger made some very important points and provocations. He also posted his slides on Facebook last night, so you can find them. This is one of them. This is Roger talking about our need to change metaphors, and in many ways I think, well actually Shinwei was talking a bit about this as well. I suppose just a couple of comments from me. Roger was also provoking us in saying, that Leonardo's done pretty well. But he talked about the context that it came out of in the 50s. So post-war, a need to rethink. We've been through two world wars. And in a moment I'm going to just say something very briefly about a vision that Carl Gustav Jung had just after the First World War. Basically kind of saying, well, unless we change something pretty fundamentally, there's going to be another war. And of course we didn't, and there was. I think Roger's dad in the 50s was really coming out of a particular context and saying that we needed to make some fundamental changes. And the journal was, in many ways, really important contribution. It was a vital outlet to encourage, validate, and share new forms of collaboration that he thought and others in his community thought was really necessary. I suppose the key question that we're asking today, is that still valid? Is that still needed? Or another way to maybe answer that question is, that particular kind of publishing, that particular form of sharing, is that the right form now? So really thinking about the context we're in now, is Leonardo in the right shape? Is it operating in the right way? If it's still about encouraging, validating, and sharing, how could it do that? How can it do that even better? So I think that's a key question. I think as well, Roger talked about a network of villages. He talked about the need to rethink science and to change our metaphors. And we also heard, I don't know how to say your name, Donnell?
It's close.
Close. Well, the very fine gentleman over there who talked about the adjacent possible. And it reminded me as well of a number of conversations I've had with people in the Leonardo community about the difficulty of bringing people together and finding a way out of different sort of sets of biases into some form of alchemical fusion. And you talked about the adjacent possible, and I knew about that idea, through evolutionary biology. And I just grabbed a couple of images from Stephen Johnson's book about where good ideas come from. I'm going to describe this image because I'm not sure you can see it, but it speaks, I think, a bit to the themes yesterday. It's a map of history in a way. So down the bottom is the timeline, 70,000 BC. It moves up to 2000 BC. It suggests that in 60,000 BC we got boats, a little bit later we got bows and arrows, a little bit later we got cloth, sewing, pottery. Around 8,000 BC we got cities, and there was an incredible proximity of people, a sharing of ideas, a migration of ideas as well around these new urban centres. We wouldn't call them cities today, so I suppose that's important. But there was something really valuable about the new forms of proximity and these kind of condensed forms of human habitation, which led to an incredible upsurge in innovation. So that long list on the right is the new ideas, the new forms of human innovation that came about through this network of cities. But just that's also an illustration of the adjacent possible. Something along the lines of what we get in evolutionary biology. So just, really simple idea, which a lot of people were talking about yesterday, so I thought I'd put an image up. And if you've got A, B, C, D, it's in the nature of the creativity of the universe to immediately look at what might happen if these elements are combined. So the adjacent possible offers you AB, AC, AD, etc. As soon as they come into being through this creative interaction, you get the possibility of AB, AC, AB, DC, etc. So you get exponential growth. So that's a very fine idea, and I think you were talking a bit about how, in some ways you think that there is great value and potential in bringing new forms of thinking, expertise, practice together and seeing how what adjacent possible comes into being. I suppose, the conversations that I've had with a lot of Leonardo members and the wider network, we've looked at places where some of that's happened quite effectively. So we looked at the Macy conferences, we've looked at Eranos, the place that I work now, Dartington, a lot of talk about Black Mountain College, places where creative collisions happened that fundamentally affected the trajectory of each of the people involved. But it's not always that easy to create those conditions. So it's not just about putting people in the same room. Looking at the report from the NAS about new forms of education, again, it's not just about some structural or infrastructural change. We need some more sophisticated thinking on that. I do want to mention one example, Carl Gustav Jung, because again, Roger and I talked quite a lot about Eranos. If you don't know about it, it was a project funded I think started in 1920. It was actually Andrew Mellon money, but it was funding some gatherings that took place on the edge of a lake in Switzerland. And I think it speaks to quite a lot of the themes that we've been looking at. So the people who turned up, some of the key people were Carl Gustav Jung, Joseph Campbell, Mircea Eliade, some remarkable people starting to define the fields of psychology, cosmology, mythology, a lot of ologies, but really important ologies. But they were coming together in this beautiful setting. In a way, the formula looks quite simple. They had a beautiful round table. I think they could sit 15 in the main house. They had almost the same table in the garden down by the lake, and they would eat, drink, talk together, walk, and then regather in the garden. Something else went on though. They were all sharing the ideas that were most pressing to them, and somehow something changed, and all of their work was affected. And Joseph Campbell edited the Eranos papers, and they would all point to what was going on in those dialogues and say, well, this is the thing that fundamentally affected my work. And back to one of the things Roger said about Leonardo. Leonardo wasn't working alone. And all of these people would also say, well, it was only through this dialogue, through this exchange, that my ideas really moved anywhere. Really powerful example of that. So Carl Gustav Jung, if you don't know, he had a really intensive relationship with Sigmund Freud. For 7 years, they analyzed each other's dreams every day. That's pretty intensive. But there was a point at which Jung became disillusioned with Freud, his obsessive focus on the nuclear family and interpersonal relationships. And he had a series of dreams, and he took them to Freud and asked him to analyze them. And Freud saw interpersonal stuff. In fact, he saw death wishes in some of the dreams. He thought that Jung was trying to steal his power, and so there was one dream, a very famous dream, with the strata of a house, a very fine house, and you wander down and you find yourself in the scullery, and then you wander down and you're in the basement, and then there was another basement underneath, and there were a couple of skulls in the earth on this very deep basement. And all Freud could see was a death wish, that Jung was trying to imagine that Freud would die and he would take his place. And because Jung was becoming disillusioned, he no longer had the means to really resist this analysis. He didn't have another way of thinking about this dream. So he simply collected a lot of these dreams. And it would only be many years later that he could go back to them and see that this dream wasn't really about him. It wasn't really his dream, in a way. It was our dream. He was starting to see something about, for him at least, the structure or the nature of the psyche, not his alone, ours. He had another really important dream where he was walking and he spots Siegfried on the hill. And he doesn't know why, but he suddenly realizes he's got a rifle, and then he has to shoot Siegfried. And he takes the rifle, he aims, shoots, and kills Siegfried. When he has that dream, he doesn't know what to do with it. Years later, partly because of the Eranos conversations, partly because of the insight of other people, he can go back to that dream. And this is just, it's actually just after this First World War. During that war, he also had dreams where he saw the rivers of Europe's, the rivers of Europe running red with blood. Now, anybody could have had that dream. What he was doing was starting to make the shift from thinking that the dream was about him, his interpersonal relationships, and it was about something greater. What he was seeing in the Siegfried dream was that we're dominated by this hero archetype. And what he was seeing in the dream, and he would later say, is that we need to kill off the hero archetype. And unless we do that, war will come again, because we will reach for the kind of heroic, conquering hero to lead us. And if we don't kill off the archetype, this will happen again. So in many ways, he was seeing the emergence of Hitler as a leader and other heroic, conquering heroes as leaders, and the consequences of that. I think I would argue that we're still in that position. When we look at Erdogan, when we look at Trump, when we look at Putin, we haven't done very much with the hero archetype. It still speaks, I think, as well to some of the themes yesterday when we're looking at Leonardo, we're holding up these people as if they work alone. Instead of thinking about an ecology of practices, an ecology of ideas, instead of thinking about the co-creation of knowledge. So somehow there's some really fundamental and deep work that needs to go on.